So,
Hi.
Hi. So, some people call you Rob. Some people call you Father Wright.
Mm-hmm.
More recently, some people call you Bishop-elect Wright.
Yeah.
But I know you best as Robert. So, Robert, we are here to take a little time to reflect and to remember and to share those thoughts. I wonder if we could start ways back and talk about what led you to where you are today. What led you to even considering the priesthood, your ministry?
Well, the shortest possible answer is I'm here because I am trying to respond to what I think God is calling me to do and to be. And that's just been a long journey. It's been 48 years so far. People sort of only think in terms of when I was ordained or when I joined the church as an adult, but I believe that when I look back, everything that I have been through and been a part of has been part of this new phase. So, you know, I graduated from high school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and went to the Navy, and always felt very much connected to God. And it was extraordinary for me to see the world, God's world, and see God's oceans. And I flew in helicopters and spent a lot of time hovering over God's world, and it was extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. I always got a sense of the genius of God, and it always made an impact on me. I don't think I was in church very much, but I was very clear that God was real and that God was a genius and that God was creative, and it made a difference to know that in big and small ways. And I got out of the Navy and decided I wanted to go to college, and went to college and began studying history and political science and literature and so on and so forth, and really fell in love with words. I think I've always loved words, but I really fell in love with words. And as part of that, I began to really read the Bible for myself. I heard the Bible always referred to in kind and unkind ways, but I decided I wanted to read it for myself, and just began from Genesis to Revelation, and really fell in love with the words and the words that people tried to use to attempt to describe the goodness of God, God's mercy, and to tell that story, and use really small lives and big lives and sins and redemption and all of that, common people's lives, and that made an impression on me, and I saw myself in those stories. And then during college, wandered into a parish at the invitation of a friend, and there was something familiar about that. I didn't join a denomination, I joined a small community, and the minister was there, and the minister was normal. I like to say he was just wonderfully normal, and he was genuine, and he didn't have all the answers, but what he did know, he said from his heart. And that made an impact on me. And then I lived there and worked there, and you know, had a job as a child advocate working for the Children's Defense Fund. But I kept turning up on Sundays and kept turning up to Bible study. And after about 3 years of just being there and serving and being a part of that community, he asked me, have you ever thought about being a priest? And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard, because I had some assumptions about what it means to be a minister, to live that life, and I didn't see myself, given my own personal journey, as someone who could be a priest. And so after I stopped laughing at him, he said, well, why don't you go over to Virginia Seminary, which is in Alexandria, Virginia, and we were in Washington, D.C. at the time, and said, go over there, and if that intrigues you, if that speaks to you, then let me know and we'll talk about that. If not, then we're done here, and we can continue on it. So you see who got the last laugh. Mm-hmm. So Virginia Seminary to Cambridge in England to ordination at the Washington National Cathedral, and then service at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. I started off as a school chaplain. I loved that work. And then the canon pastor and the vicar of the congregation of the Cathedral. St. John the Divine, there just about 5 years or so, and then at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Atlanta for the last decade. And now in October I'll be ordained 10th Bishop of the Diocese of Atlanta.
So in the beginning you said that it's been 48 years in the making.
Yes.
Yet you started with your graduation from high school. What can you tell us about the time leading up to high school? What about your earlier years?
3 things come to mind. The first thing is that my mother was a church organist. She's now deceased. She was a church organist, and you know, listening to her play music, church music, hymnody, the spirituals, gave me those words of the spirituals and of the hymnody, you know, sort of gave me a spiritual vocabulary. Singing is important. Music is very important to me, very important to me. My mother, when she wasn't playing the organ, was listening to music, Mahalia Jackson and classical church music, and I didn't realize it for a long time, but that left an imprint. Second, my father died when I was about 13, and we did what many people do. We stopped going to church after a terrible trauma to the family. But I was grateful that I had friends who would invite us to church, and so my sister and I would go to their church, and so I never really got caught up in denominationalism. I really saw God in church and realized that church is really a big family, whether we knew it or not. And so I was grateful for that. That made an impression on me, and I think I have the best part of that still within me about ecumenical work and conversation, and interfaith work and conversation. And then I think the most important part of my spiritual journey as a child was learning that I was adopted, probably around the time I was 8 or 9 years old, and realizing that I was born in an orphanage, very likely to a biracial couple, and lived there for 9 months, and that my mother and father wanted children, were not able to have children. They were 50 years old and walked into a room full of cribs, as the story goes, and stopped at mine for no good reason. And so I like to say that I'm the poster child for grace. So all of that, if you put all of that in other parts together, you know, it's just me trying to respond to the grace that I think that God has extended to me.
5 words that describe who you are.
5 words that describe who I am. I think I'm grateful. I think I'm grateful. I think when you peel it all back, I think I'm grateful. I think I am funny. I enjoy a good joke. I enjoy telling a joke. I appreciate humor. There's a genius in humor that I really appreciate, and that I think I get. I think God's got a great sense of humor. I'm energetic. I have a lot of energy, and like to do. I like to do, and that I think that I'm quiet. I think I'm more quiet than people know. I really value being quiet and holding quiet in balance with doing. Is that 4 or 5?
That's 4.
That's 4. I don't know. I don't know what the 5th would be. I think I really like people. I'm curious about people. I mean, I've known some phenomenal people, not just, you know, heroes and heroines, but just people who seemingly had small lives, ordinary lives, who were really extraordinary people So I'm always curious about people's journeys and their courage, and I take a lot from meeting people. So.
Thank you. What about if someone were not to look at your resume or anything about you, anything's been written or said about you, what are 3 things that you could say that people just wouldn't know about you? What would those 3 things be?
That they wouldn't know about me?
Mm-hmm. Not based on your resume or your story or journey, just 3 things about you that people just don't know.
I really like kids. I think kids are fantastic. I really love the ocean. I just love the ocean. And I like to travel. I'm curious about the world. I think the world has great sermons to preach if you just travel and go hear them. So.
Okay, we decided 10 years ago at the kitchen table in New York to come to Atlanta. Atlanta called us. God guided us here. How do you feel, looking back on that time, about the 10 years you've been here?
I feel great about it. I feel right about it. I think the time and the season of prayer and conversation that we had in New York at our kitchen table was the right thing to do before we took any action. I think we wanted to go where God called us. I think we made those prayers. We worked through a pros and cons list. We considered our family first, and I think that Atlanta was where God wanted us, and I think Atlanta is where God wants us. It's been the right place for us. We've seen the confirmations along the way, in the fruit that we've experienced in our work and in our family. So it was the right decision. God does guide.
Yes.
Wow.
3 most memorable experiences at St. Paul's.
3 most memorable experiences at St. Paul's. Number 1, I think that I'll forever remember how we started off with virtually no children at St. Paul's when I began, and how now, when the children come down to the altar rail for communion, they extend from the altar rail all the way to the back wall of the church and out the door on many Sundays. And to see them with their hands outstretched and open, I think is extraordinary. And it's a picture that stays in my head. I think number 2, every Christmas season, St. Paul's has a Christmas concert, and we gather in the evening. There's always a moment towards the end of the concert where one of our great soloists sings "O Holy Night," and the lights are down and the spotlight is on the soloist, and it's amazing. It's an amazing moment. It's quiet. It's reverent, and people are almost leaning forward in their seats. It's almost as if the birth is happening in that moment. People are experiencing anew some aspect of that story. I love that moment. And then the last thing that comes immediately to mind is when our teenagers had come back from a mission trip to an orphanage in Jamaica, and they got up to the pulpit to tell the congregation about their experience. And one of the teenage girls talked about how they were leaving the orphanage after a day of service, and in looking at themselves and looking at the children they had served, some of the teenagers began to take off their shoes and give them to the children. And some of the other teenagers literally took the shirts off their back and gave them to the children at the orphanage. And that in of itself was powerful. But it made me think that church does work, and church can work. If what we have done and what we have said at church contributed to them having that kind of heart in that moment, then there's something to this church.
So what are your dreams for St. Paul's going forward?
I believe that St. Paul's best days are ahead of it still. I think that if St. Paul's continues to do what I think we tried to do, which was to lift up Jesus Christ and to welcome all manner of people, to excel in providing worship that is not esoteric, but people can feel it and experience it, to open the doors and call people to prayer and call people to consider the good news. I think that if people will continue to do what we try to do, which is to be generous and to be open and to allow children in and to give them a place of honor in worship, to greet the haves and the have-nots with the same respect, to sing like there's no tomorrow. I think that's what I want for St. Paul's. I think if we do those sorts of things and continue to welcome God in the way that we have tried to welcome God, then I think that St. Paul's future is bright and thriving.
And now, as you're on the precipice to this new ministry, this new leg of your journey in becoming bishop, what visions do you have? How do you proceed?
I went to a chapel service for children some months ago, 7, 6, 8 months or so ago, and I heard the children sing a song called "Draw the Circle Wide, Draw It Wider Still," and that really spoke to me. And even this morning, I was thinking about that really the gospel is intended to be an ever-widening circle of love and fellowship. And then when you think about the universe is a circle that revolves around a center, I think that's the vision that I have, is that to get the good news out, to communicate effectively and compellingly about a God who has met us in Jesus Christ, who doesn't condemn us but forgives us, is what I want to do. I want to say that enthusiastically. I want to say that authentically. I want to say that in North Georgia and South Georgia and West Georgia and East Georgia. I want to basically just invite people to widen the circle of their own personal hearts and the circle of their community, because I think that's at the heart of the gospel. So that's what I want to say, and I know that I've already met people who are doing that work, and I want to partner with them, and I want to enlarge my own vision by hearing from them and see how God is calling us to do this. But I believe, as Jesus said, that the fields are ripe for the harvest. I just feel like we've got to get out there and tell out the good news.
What inspires you? What gets you up in the morning?
Beside coffee, God gets me up in the morning. I have this energy, I have a life, I have this calling, I have this purpose because God has fanned these flames. I owe God everything. I'm nothing without God. I don't do it out of obligation. I can't imagine myself not spending time with God in contemplation and quiet and understanding the scriptures and trying to wrestle with them. I don't understand life now apart from that. I'm so glad that I've discovered this life, or this life has discovered me. So God gets me up in the morning. I'm so grateful when I sit at my desk some mornings at 4 o'clock in the morning or 4:30 in the morning, and I watch nighttime turn to day, and I hear the owls and sometimes the woodpeckers outside, and you just realize that life is really good. Life can be hard, but life is good, and so I'm grateful.
Is there anything else that you want to share about you, about your journey, about your memories here?
There's just a lot of people I owe a debt of gratitude to. What I do think I know is that it takes a lot of people to make an ordained person. A lot of people's hopes and dreams and wisdom and advice go in to helping someone take these kinds of steps. And so when I think about my own journey, I think about how many people I could never possibly thank enough for their example and for their faith.
Thank you.